Copy, intermountain 1 and 2.
Don't want nothing. And it looks like that's what I'm gonna get. I feel I need something. Taking my time and taking my forget about everything. Too much things running around in my brain, so come on, sweetness. Won't you please again? Oh, love me, baby. I squeeze me, mama. And then kiss the door. I know I didn't dream it. I guess I do want something, but I can't seem to find it yet. Sometimes I feel like I'm nothing. You say nothing you could ever forget. Well, that's just one thing. You said they keep me hanging on. Sometimes I could just scream. Baby, don't you do me wrong.
That we were just down for the residents to make egress out of there. There's a swamp across the road towards the west of that road.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Lookout. Today's the last day of July, and we're covering a couple new fires here that are burning in California for a change, not in Utah or Arizona. So we're looking at there's a new fire up by Susanville, which is the 1-4 fire, and there's also a new fire over on the Klamath called the Big Cliff. Nothing crazy going on either of those right now. Susanville fire took off about 2 hours ago, and it's pretty erratic. Looks like they're going to get a handle on it. It looks like AirTech sounds confident they're going to get a handle on it in the next couple hours. They got a ton of aircraft on it. It's not huge. And then the fire in the Klamath has potential to burn longer, so we're going to kind of jump in and check out that stuff. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to our sponsors. I'm going to go right on the map here, and we'll go to the Big Cliff fire. All right, so this is where the fire was this morning. We'll zoom out so you can see where it is, but this morning the fire was a lightning strike, and by the time they mapped it this morning, it was about 24 acres. First they called it in and said it was bigger, and that often happens. Fires look bigger, and then you map them. One thing to keep in mind is that mapping 20 acres looking straight down on it versus mapping 20 acres that's on a super steep slope, it's kind of two different things. You know, the fire could end up being, 150 times larger, so 1.5 times larger, just because the way a slope works, if you look straight down on it, you're making it flat. So fire's bigger now, obviously. Burned all day pretty well, and so keep the fire in the middle of the screen here. We've got north at the top, so this is the fire. Here's the Butler fire that's kind of wrapping up now. Salmon River Road, Sawyer's Bar, Cecilville down here, Callahan. So it's kind of just outside the Russian wilderness. Here's the Russian wilderness, so it's kind of burning in this little crook to the west of the Russian wilderness, about probably 10 or 15 air miles from Etna. And in the big picture, that's kind of between Wairika over here, or let's just say it's between Mount Shasta and the ocean for the biggest of pictures. If you're joining us to check out the Susanville 1-4 fire, we'll get to that. We think it's kind of looking pretty good as far as threatening Susanville, and so we'll get to that in a minute. But for now, we're looking at Big Cliff fire up by Mount Shasta, between Mount Shasta and the ocean. So anyway, this fire, lost my train of thought. Fire history. This fire is burning inside of a big fire called the Whites Fire that we helped to do the mapping on this fire in 2014. It was part of a complex that burned a whole lot of different areas in the Salmon River watershed. A lot of these fires were pretty high severity, and so you've got the Whites Fire there, and then you've got to the south here you've got the 2021 River Complex, which was also a huge fire, 200,000 acres. Also had quite a bit of high severity. So this fire's got a ways to go as far as burning before it gets out of a 10-year-old burn. And as we've talked about on here before, previous fires kind of shape the dynamics of future fire. And so this fire is going to be hard to fight. And we saw that today with kind of just how it kind of built all day. And the reason for that is if you come in here close and look at the ground where the fire's burning, one, it's really steep, and two, it's just 10-year-old burnt forest that never had any thinning or anything done on it. So it's this crazy kind of mishmash of dead and down wood and brush. And we'll try to find some photos. It'd be nice if anyone's out there on the ground and can send us some photos of the fuels. We'd appreciate that. But this just makes for really difficult firefighting, because if you're going to cut a line around this fire, you basically have to buck all of these logs. You know, firefighting is basically cutting a trail. And so if you think of like having a trail through this landscape and then going out there to clear it on foot on some of the steepest ground you've ever worked on, that's kind of what firefighters face in ground like this with containing a fire. So it's dangerous. You know, luckily as you get kind of more time out from a fire, there's less standing snags, but you can see kind of from this weird crosshatch here, there's a lot of standing dead rotten trees, and standing dead rotten trees kill firefighters. So especially if they're on fire and they've been on fire for a day or two, burning snag patches are like the hotshot nightmare. So that is the big cliff fire, and as we've been talking about on here, this fire is going to do a lot of good in some places, and in other places it's going to burn hotter. But when you look at this landscape of what it looked like before the fire, 2014, let's just like pull up our little time machine here. Go back to this 2005. This 2012. So you see, you had this really heavy forest in here. One thing that you can, and also you had this area had been logged down in the lower portions, but maybe not up in here. So that creates, you know, that management history is going to kind of affect the subsequent fires and also how they behave. All right, so we'll come back to this. I want to jump over to Susanville real quick. I think we could talk a lot. Well, this fire is probably going to burn for a while, but just to give you kind of that quick visual, is like this is what it looked like 13 years ago, and then this is what it looks like now after that first fire. And so a fire we have in now, a lot of the smaller trees died in that last fire. All these kind of smaller trees died in that previous fire, but a lot of the bigger, older growth trees survived the previous fire. So what you've got that survived, a lot of those trees are fire resistant. You know, they survived a pretty hot fire in the past. And so this fire, in the portions where it's burning downhill through this burnt forest, it's going to be cleaning up dead and down material, and we're at a kind of proper interval for that to happen. In areas where it gets aligned with the slope and can make a run, it might kill some of the other trees. But as we saw in the Butler, this is a super similar story to what we've been studying on the Butler fire, is that getting fire back in these recent burn scars is a good thing, and it cleans up places that, you know, this is never going to get cleaned up by any other means than by fire. And I'm not making a judgment on the Forest Service trying to put this out or anything right now. I'm just telling you, like, fact is, like, no one's going to come in here and clean up this forest but fire. And if we put all the fires out for the next 20 or 30 years and then it burns again, it's going to kill all these trees out here that currently would survive this fire burning underneath them. So that's the big picture on the big cliff. So let's run over to Prisonville, California. And I can say that because I'm a Lassen County native. All right, so right off the bat here, Susanville, east side of the Sierra Nevada mountains. The divide goes right through, kind of between Susanville and Westwood, and so it's desert. And crazy things happen on desert fires. Desert fires are very dangerous for firefighters because things change. The winds change all the time in the desert. You'd be on one side of the fire, and then 10 minutes later, the fire goes a different direction. So the fire is burning here on the north side of Susanville. And Ryan Kelper says that it's been flown, so let's see. Kelper Stevens, Lookout Ryan. Let's see if we can find a new perimeter. All right, we got no perimeter, but basically what's happening is the fire started right here off the end of Paiute Lane, and it was burning in here, and right at first it started to burn up the hill with gravity, and then we got like a thunderstorm went by to the north, and we got these crazy outflow winds, and the fire pushed right down towards town, and it was pretty dramatic. So let's look real quick at what happened there. All right, so here's early in the fire. This fire really kind of went fairly ballistic right off the bat. Started blowing towards the mobile home park near the rancheria. It started burning towards town. And since then, over the last couple hours, luckily today they've got kind of full availability of the aircraft fleet. So the IC ordered a huge number of aircraft, and he got most of them. And now they've been able to pretty much paint the fire. But here, if we look at this kind of this progression of the initial fire kind of taking off, like it started off small, as every fire does, started to kind of go up the slope with kind of a light prevailing wind, and then we got that kind of outflow wind from that thunderstorm to the north, and the fire just did a 180 and started heading to town. And this is why firefighting in fine fuels in the desert is so dangerous. Is, you know, typically we engage the fire at the heel and start making our way towards the head. And so if you got a bunch of people fighting fire on the heel or on the flanks, and suddenly the wind shifts 180, suddenly you're at the head of the fire. And fighting fire, we very rarely can fight an aggressive, fast-moving fire at the head, on foot, or with fire engines. You know, we need bulldozers, we need aircraft to cool it down. So right off the bat, that 180 really kind of accelerated kind of the oh no factor on this fire. So so if we're looking here, the fire kind of started to push right back down towards this mobile home park, and it also moved out towards this other housing over here at the Susanville Rancheria. So right now there's not really any threat, it seems, of the fire burning into the downtown part of Susanville. There's, you know, kind of the worst thing that could happen right now would be the fire getting away and going up the hill, but they have so many aircraft and people on this fire, which is still fairly small. It seems likely that won't happen. But let's just look a little more at like what happened then after that wind shift. Opened up a big flank, and it ran over towards the rancheria. And so the problem kind of for a minute was just that it was too smoky kind of out here in this part of the fire down at the bottom, like down in here, to get aircraft in there right away. But they had people on the ground. There's a bunch of engines, there's water tenders, everything else. So that's the story on this fire. Right now, if you look at it from Hamilton Mountain, which is kind of on Verdanier Pass, if we look at the last like half hour, it's kind of in the shade now. It's pretty hard to see what's going on, but it's still kind of smoking away at the heel. But it looks like they've got it. They're going to get it wrapped. So nice stop. One really lucky thing about like us being in kind of mild conditions right now is that if we look at the flight radar here, they had so many aircraft going here. They had like 3 or 4 small CAL FIRE air tankers, and they had a C-130, and they had a 737. So 2 very large air tankers, or 1 very large, 2 big ass air tankers, 4 small ones, a bunch of helicopters. If we had more going on, if we had 4 or 5 of these fires going on at once right now, we wouldn't get all those air tankers. So that's the nice thing about when your fire happens on a day that's slow just about everywhere else. But yeah, back to the kind of fire history here on the east side. You see that, this is the first CAL FIRE fire that I worked on mapping, 2001, the Devil Fire. These fires, they get started in the afternoon. They make a massive run to the northeast with a strong prevailing wind. and then they pretty much get wrapped in the first day or two, because once the sun goes down, the wind stops blowing, there's a lot of resources. Rarely they burn 2 or 3 days because of poor access, but this is kind of a pattern we see across kind of this entire east side, is that you get these kind of feather, and we've talked about this before, you get these kind of feather-shaped fires that are wind-driven that kind of follow the edge of the desert all the way down from Oregon down to the northern Sierra. So we're always kind of interested in those patterns, seeing how the previous fires burn. And so when you see a fire take off here, you know, I wasn't expecting it to run to the south. You know, I thought it'd be running more off towards like Hidden Valley. Anyway, that's your Lassen fire. Nice stop, Cal Fire LMU. I was listening to the radio the whole time, and it was hectic, and they were doing it. So shout out to all the Cal Fire, to everyone, but especially Cal Fire LMU. Nice stop, fellas and gals. All right, so we'll go out to Utah and Arizona, check out those fires, and then we'll come back and talk a little more about the Big Cliff. Someone sent a comment. I got Diamond Mountain Hotshots have their headquarters out here, and their PT hike out here is to hike up to the top of this mountain. And someone was like, "Oh no, it's only got 8% shade. We can't we can't afford to lose a single percent of shade on our PT hike." So looks like the big hill is safe, fellas. All right, Dragon Bravo. So we left Dragon Bravo yesterday, and got a squeaky chair here. We left Dragon Bravo in the middle of a big firing operation. We were looking at it from space and waving our arms around about what may or may not be happening. So overnight they flew infrared. You'll recall that, and infrared showed it basically coming out to the road, not crossing the road, and also pretty much staying within their firing op here that they did yesterday. Sometimes it's hard to tell on the infrared if there's mapping error or if there's you can't really always count on the mapping being like perfect. So it's tough to make real nuanced calls. But if we look at what we had yesterday with the satellite imagery, yesterday, we talked about how the night before last, all these white dots were the perimeter where they were lighting everything with a drone out here. And then at noon yesterday, we had this real intense heat cooking up here in what they'd fired 12 to 18 hours earlier, and we were wondering if they would hold this flank here. They're trying to kind of bring the fire out to the road here so they can wrap it and not worry about it coming uncontrolled from down here, smacking the Kaibab Lodge. I always want to call it the Kaibab Lounge for some reason, but so it looks like they pulled it off, and that wasn't going to be easy. I think we looked yesterday at the fuels out here, which are they're no joke. Like, you got this subalpine fir and lodgepole, and just all these species here are extremely volatile. One of the reasons for that is you've historically had like elk and deer and other things that browse heavily, and these trees they've evolved being super full of pitch so they don't just get completely eaten by large ungulates. So and even though we don't have necessarily like huge herds of elk out here anymore, we still have tree species and stuff that have evolved with a different level of what we'd call herbivory. You've got aspen out here too, and the aspen strategy, instead of putting energy into pitch to protect themselves from being browsed, their strategy is just to grow like 10 zillion sprouts. And then the idea is, well, they're not going to graze us all. So they grow faster, they establish quicker. And then some of these conifers, like the subalpine fir, the spruce, they grow really slow because they're like, well, I'm going to put all my energy into tasting bad. But they taste bad because they're full of basically gasoline. So not easy place to do what these guys did, putting all that fire on the ground, holding on to it. And it's hard to tell here where they turned the corner if that's working out, like if that was the plan. But I don't know what's going on with that. So elsewhere on the fire today, last night the fire had run an extra 3 miles from the night before, and you see there's some new firing operations going on out here, kind of trying to tie this flank of the fire back into the park road. Like I've said before, often on these big fires, we're just kind of herding them. We may not be able to stop the head of it, but we can kind of sometimes steer them a little, suggest that maybe they should go one way or another. And so that's what they were doing out here with this firing is they can't fire the fire directly right in here. They're backing off and firing this road that they've prepped. And when we look at the heat satellites from today, it looks like they continued firing down that road, but it also looks like the fire's run like another, several miles today. We've been talking about how this fire may eventually get out here and bump into the white sage fire. Fuels get progressively lighter as you get closer to white sage, but out in here there's this big burn scar that's how old? Uh, 19 years old, and that's got fine fuels in it and stuff that'll burn. So it's interesting also to look at as the fire moves out into this burn scar. I was looking a little at like what that burn scar looks like, and thanks to Google Street View that goes right through it, you can see that this burn has a lot of aspen in it and a lot of grass and a lot of fine fuel, so plenty of fuel for the fire to run through. Also a place where retardants can be really effective unless the wind's blowing like 10 million miles an hour like it has been. But this fire scar represents a place that they may pick up this fire as it comes. And this fire scar also represents some of what the high severity burn is going to look like. I got a comment from someone who has worked up here who says that there's a lot of this kind of non-native locust that comes in and and cheatgrass, which is terrible because cheatgrass is like the devil's own thing. This is all cheatgrass out in here, and cheatgrass loves fire. Every time it burns more the next time. If we have a fire in here, so now we have a fire, we got all this cheatgrass. Next fire is going to expand farther out, and so cheatgrass is like this cancer that, coupled up with fire, is taking over the kind of interior west. So this fire is going to be in that fire before we know it. Represents a chance to maybe get ahead of it, but it also has all this land out here that it can continue to gobble through if we keep getting the winds. No major change in the wind forecast, so Dragon Bravo marches on. I don't know why it keeps adding my ruler here. Stop that. So we'll check that again. I get up every morning to see if my dreams came true. And nice job to the team holding on this. I got a comment from a friend this morning who teaches fire behavior classes nationally. He said the incident commander on this incident command team that's running this fire is a qualified fire behavior analyst, and that he makes his ops chiefs do some modeling and he makes them show their work. So if they say, hey, we're going to go out here and we're going to put in this line and indirect, he makes them show using the tools we've got, tools of the trade, that's actually going to work, and that it isn't just going to get blown over by the fire. So my buddy who teaches the class says IC is pretty squared away in these big picture things, which is important when your fire is kind of turned into a big chess game. I mean, when we look at it, still we've got active fire down here. There's very few places on this fire. That's why they're saying the containment's like 4% or something, is because the fires just kind of outpaced firefighters for the most part. The places that are no longer burning are places pretty much where the fire decided to stop. But there's very little out here that's the result of direct firefighting as far as where the fire stopped. Where you see the white line is basically where the fire's not moving anymore. And that's not to throw shade on the firefighters. You could just say, like, hey, we've had a week of kind of record-setting dryness coupled with high winds. And what are you going to do? All right. All right, we're going to jump up to Monroe Canyon. Flying north. We're in Arizona. We're going to fly our map spaceship up to Utah. Okay. So we got too many things going on here. We'll back off a few layers. So let's start off with, on this fire, let's start off with our infrared image from yesterday. Kind of good snapshot yesterday of where the heat was. So yesterday we saw there was, active heat on the north end of the fire and a little bit on the, so we're coming around to the east side of the fire here. So it was active on the kind of the north, the south, and the kind of northeast. And if we look at our heat perimeter from today compared to yesterday's satellite image, you can see that it grew, by midnight last night, 12 hours after this image, it had grown some places like over a mile. We've been talking over here kind of on the northeast flank of the fire how they were going to potentially use firing off of a dozer line out here to contain the fire, and the fire basically spotted all the way across this valley onto Mormon Mountain and has made a big run. As of this was last night at midnight, it made a big run. So that red infrared is kind of the difference between this infrared and the white line is spread that happened between last night and midnight and the night before that at midnight. So you've got Monroe over here, Annabella out the north, Glenwood farther up. Fire's kind of, we thought yesterday and we still think that the fire's probably going to eat most of this area down to the valley floor or down to the sagebrush from where it is now on this Annabella side. Over here towards Monroe, the fire's not really very active out here between, like south of Glenwood Mountain. The fire's not really active until you get down towards Monroe Peak. So with these kind of southerly winds, the threat to Monroe is more from this new spread down in here, and this new spread down in here has been very active and is going to continue to keep moving this way. If we look at our kind of heat satellites, which aren't the best, but they're the best we have for kind of sub-daily perimeter, we see that the fire's kind of moved down in the sagebrush here south of Monroe. Nothing's happening here kind of in the middle, and then it's very active on the north end still. So it still seems like kind of the mega fire big picture is the fire's going to burn north of Glenwood Mountain. It's probably going to burn most of the timber, and down here it's going to burn until the weather changes or something, because this is terrible access as far as getting out here and fighting fire on the ground with dozers, whatever else. So that's kind of your big picture view of Glenwood Mountain. I don't know the ecology out here well enough to like zoom in and start talking about much more than that. But people have been sending me comments, and I appreciate them, especially on YouTube, as to what they know about these places and what they think I'm getting wrong or right. So if you think I'm getting stuff wrong, let me know, because I'm not from here and I don't really know the ins and outs of a lot of this stuff. I'm learning like a lot of you are at the same time. Okay, so I want to switch gears. I got to drink some water. My water glasses are all empty. Poor planning. We're working on our video series right now about Southern California. It's going to come out in basically in about a week. First video is coming out. So getting some good footage together of LA, a bike trip we did around there in May. Basically, during the fires down there, we were covering it, and the YouTube comments were just like crazy off the hook. Blaming Gavin Newsom, or blaming the dam removal in Northern California, or blaming space lasers, blaming poor forest management, even though there's not really any forests in Southern California that would be managed. It was crazy, and many of you saw that. So anyway, we decided to do a trip down there just to kind of like go see it for ourselves and tell some stories to hopefully like straighten out some of this just wackadoodle conspiracy theories about space lasers and bullet trains and like you name it, bad information. So we're getting that together. It's coming out soon, and check out, we got a trailer on YouTube for that. I'm looking forward to it. I got to hang out with some of my best friends who are super smart fire people. yeah, smash the like button and check out these videos because we want people to watch them. So we're gonna jump back to Big Cliff a little, get a little deeper into the geekery, and then hang it up. Beep Beep Jape says no forests in SoCal. Come on, man. Okay, well, no forests in Altadena or Palisades where those areas burned. That's what we're talking about. Yeah, we know there's trees down there. We do. Let's go there just for a second. Yeah, so we're gonna look at the Altadena fire. This is a satellite image of the city on fire. I wanted to troll everyone and like turn this into like a space laser target, you know, like put little crosshairs and coordinates on every house and say that it was some sort of like leaked secret government document or something, but we're not gonna do that. Anyway, yeah, we got on our bikes and we rode our bikes around out here, and we talk about it, so that's gonna be in the video. And then we stayed in Hollywood, right under the Hollywood sign, in this really crazy rental, kind of like the worst possible place you could have a house, right under the Hollywood sign. And rode our bikes around from there, rode our bikes all the way from there to Altadena, over here. Along the way we checked out what was going on in some of these kind of urban canyons and stuff, and then we also rode our bikes around the Palisades fire over here, and then we rode our bikes back from Santa Monica all the way back to Hollywood. And it's a good way to see land on a bike, so that's what our special is about, and we hope you check it out. Anyway, now we're going to go as far away from LA as you can get in California and still be speaking Californian. So check back in on the Big Cliff here. So, you know, I'm always curious, like, how past forest management is affecting, you know, we talk about using logging and other active management more to try to reduce fire hazards. And so it's always interesting, I think, to learn from past mistakes. You know, in the past we cut down a lot of old growth that will never grow back in the next 300 or 400 years, and then we planted all these little baby trees in there, and we said it was kind of sustainable. And then when we look at kind of what that looks like kind of after fires, oftentimes that didn't pan out, you know. So all these little baby trees that got planted, a lot of them just didn't make it through fires. And this landscape's just had a lot of fire, you know. So what's the way forward? How do we manage these timbered landscapes in a way that is active? Or you know, what can we do to avoid this all like becoming treeless, right? And so we talk a lot about fire's role in that, and it's fraught, right? We've been talking about Dragon Bravo here for the last month, and Dragon Bravo, they said they're going to let it burn for resource benefit, and now it's like the largest fire and Park Service has had since Yellowstone or something. And so they're doing their best to put this fire out, even though this fire likely would do a ton of good out here. It's complicated. It's really like fraught, right? Like right over here across the way on the river complex, talking to folks that know this area really well and care a lot about it. You know, fires get big in this country. We take a big indirect box and let fire do its thing, or sometimes light backfires. And over here in Coffee Creek, a lot of people are telling me like an entire huge area got completely devastated in part because of firing operations. So I'm going to go out and look at some of this stuff with some folks that have been talking about it, that are concerned about it. You know, there's all these, every place you go, there's got a story like that about oh, we should let more fires burn. Oh, this is what happens when you let it burn. This is what happened that was wrong. We're trying to kind of collect those stories and make some sense of it, and at least come to a common language of how you talk about fire's role in this landscape. Because the one thing that's really clear to me from working in this field, and especially in the Klamath, is that like this is the fire history map of this landscape we're talking about, and this is a map showing how many times fires overlap in this country. So there's places out here by Forks of Salmon that have burned like 5, 6, 7, 8 times in the last 100 years. So it's clear that in the Klamath we're not going to keep fire out of the landscape, but how we engage with it on the landscape is kind of the topic that we have to kind of come to terms with. Because we know that putting out every fire doesn't work, just basically because we can't get away with it. And that the pattern of fires on the landscape creates opportunities to, and so oftentimes I see a fire burning out here in the middle of a huge burn scar. It's like, well, let it burn, right? What's it going to do other than clean up stuff we're never going to get to? Well, what it could clean up would be, it could get out of here into this landscape in the front country here above Etna that hasn't had a fire for a really long time, and it's had crazy industrial timber management conducted for a long time, which has created a landscape that's really kind of sick and ain't pretty. And it's owned by powerful people who, Australian billionaires and Canadian pension funds, and like when we look at the ownership out here, we've got like a company called New Forests in yellow, and purple is EcoTrust Forest Management. And some of these boys are playing big in like the carbon markets. They're growing trees here, and then they're getting paid by polluters like Chevron. Chevron says, "Hey, I know my refinery in the Bay Area is going to put out 100 million tons of CO2 this year." And then the state says, "Well, that's fine, but you got to find a timber company that'll capture 100 million tons of carbon for you." And so these folks out here are selling the carbon that they store in their trees to Chevron, so Chevron can pollute the atmosphere. And so these folks aren't super keen necessarily to have fire burn on their land and burn up all that carbon that they're able to sell. So we've got all these kind of weird like global economic pressures that like keep us from letting fires burn out here in the backcountry. We've got smoke, which is a real thing. Like we've got a lot of people that live here in Scott Valley. Yeah, it might be nice to let this fire burn all summer for snag removal and for a future old growth forest. But if you're like dying of asthma out here in Cheeseville, like probably rather have clean air than know that there's big trees still living in the backcountry. So it's probably intractable, right? Letting fires burn. But the thing is that fire doesn't care. Like we're gonna have fires burn anyway out in the backcountry because like this fire is likely gonna burn for a long time. So let's look at the cameras for it real quick. And why would it burn for a long time? This is one of those places that that hotshots hate and smoke jumpers brag about, and locals love to say it ain't that bad. I grew up on the Klamath. This is not that steep. You can get around. Anyway, so what we got here? Hayfork Bali. Let's see. So earlier today, this fire was smoking up pretty good. Oh, Hayfork Bali. It's gonna take its time. All right, so here's some animation from today of the, sorry it's so jerky, but this is looking out at our big cliff fire from way far away. And it punched up a lot of smoke today. If we look at it from Fort Jones, it's a little harder to see because we had this kind of crazy cloud buildup over the day. But we started the day kind of started the day with the fire smoking away pretty good. And then there's kind of a lull, and it's kind of hard to tell where the once it gets kind of surrounded by the clouds, but it did smoke away pretty good all day. So I'd say this fire definitely has potential to kind of stick around for a while. We'll see what happens in the next couple days. We'll also see what happens with other starts. There's supposed to be a lot of lightning next couple days, and if you have more starts that are closer to towns and other civilization, they're going to get the big air tankers. Today, this fire had the big C-130 air tanker dropping on it for a while this morning, and then later in the afternoon, those guys went to save Susanville, which is obviously the right call. So there you go. Looking at our kind of big picture for the weather here, still don't see any big like monsoon thunderstorm buildup over Arizona. It's kind of farther out in New Mexico and down in the south. So Dragon Bravo and Monroe fires are both staying, pretty much status quo. Still got this big low spinning off here off the coast of British Columbia that's been there for like a week or more. And you can see kind of the thunderstorm action in Northern California wasn't super severe today. It was forecast to be, maybe there's some stuff going on. And then our weather forecast for Dragon Bravo today was supposed to be a little cooler, but or a little more humid, but a little more versus dry as can be. So single digits over the weekend, high temperatures, gusts to 30. Like Dragon Bravo is just going to keep going for as long as you see these single digits and below 20s on the RH. Dragon Bravo is going to run. Monroe too, just because they're under the basically the same kind of large scale weather. So over here on the big cliff, steep cliff, whatever it's called, good recovery in the humidities at night, like 60s, 80s. That helps with the rate of spread, but it's not going to do anything when the fire is mainly burning through big dead and down logs. So the reason that the Dragon Bravo and Monroe Canyon are so kind of volatile with these super low RHs is because they've got a lot of fine fuels that are receptive to spotting in the meadows and openings and stuff. And so it's less important in our big fire up here, in our cliff fire. These recoveries overnight, they don't make it any easier to cut through all those snags, but they do make it safer to, you may not have quite as like massive a blow up in the afternoon or something engaged in that country. All right. So to wrap up, if you like this stuff, check out the website, lookout.org. My wife's selling sweet coffee mugs, and I pissed off a guy on Facebook. I was rude, and I said something that I regret to an elder on Facebook, which is a low for me. I feel bad about it, but anyway, the guy, I apologized, and the guy's like, "Well, screw you." He's like, "Go peddle your T-shirts and other crap somewhere else." So that cracked me up, and I hope that he forgives me, because I was just being an a-hole, and I got it. I got set straight. So I regret that, but anyway, I like that. Go sell your T-shirts somewhere else. So if you want to support the Lookout, even though I'm a kind of an asshole sometimes, buy a T-shirt, buy a mug, and we appreciate you sticking around. Thanks, everyone, and tell your friends. I want more followers so I can make a living. Bye.